Workplace bullying, basically, it's any behavior that sets out to intimidate or to humiliate someone, particularly in the workplace.
People are scared. They are scared to speak up because they're worried that they're going to be victimized even further and lose their jobs.
You're probably gossiping about something that you don't know about.
Your job that you are hired for, a job that forms part and parcel of your job description, it's not a behavior that is said to humiliate or intimidate you.
You find the person staying away from work more often than not because who wants to go there? Why would you want to naturally go to a hostile, intimidating environment?
Welcome to the Magc Wellness podcast. My name is Putwani and I am your host for today. And today we'll be talking about workplace bullying and its effects on wellness. Today we are joined by Moleboheng Moholo, who's a clinical psychologist. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, no, it's a complete pleasure. So I'm going to give you a chance to just introduce yourself, tell us about what you do, what you're passionate about, where you work, and then we're going to delve into our very interesting topic.
All right, as you have already alluded, my name is Moleboheng Moholo. By profession, I'm a clinical psychologist. So I work both in my private practice as well as in an academic institution. My passion, it's mostly centered around raising mental health awareness. So I've also developed a platform that I call Bua Let's Talk.
Ooh.
Yeah, we call it Bua Let's Talk. Essentially, it's centered around, removing mental health stigma, promoting mental health, mental well-being, and just psychoeducating people about, mental health, your common conditions, and So basically, in a nutshell, that is who I am. I'm also a mother. I'm also a wife. Yeah.
So mental health is literally what you're passionate about.
Very passionate about it. And I think the reason for that is because, throughout my line of practice, I've come to realize that a lot of people still are misinformed.
Sure.
They are still misinformed. There's still a lot of stigma around what mental health is, that set me on that quest to say, let me be more proactive about promoting mental health. It's one thing to be in the office and see the clients that actually seek out for your help, but it's another thing to actually, take the initiative to actually raise that awareness. And that's how Bua Let's Talk was birthed.
I think I've seen Bua Let's Talk on the socials. I really think I have.
All right.
And speaking of mental health, I would assume it's very prevalent. It's a very prevalent cause. It's caused by workplace bullying, right? So to kick things off, let's describe what workplace bullying looks like. What are the common factors, and how do you know that you are being bullied in the workplace?
All right. So workplace bullying, basically, it's any behavior that sets out to intimidate or to humiliate someone, particularly in the workplace. So the bullying can happen to either an individual, sometimes it even happens as a collective, so to a group of employees.
Sure.
Yeah, it does take many forms. It's not always direct, so it can be indirect as well. The direct part is where, behavior is quite visible. For example, where, an employer or someone in a space of authority maybe sets out to humiliate someone. So it is very direct in that element. However, sometimes it's also quite covert. It's quite indirect. A typical example is where, maybe someone is over monitored, in their tasks. Maybe they are given a task that is below their skill of, level or higher. So there's direct ways of bullying, but there's also indirect ways of bullying. What's also interesting is that bullying does not, or workplace bullying in particular, is not only centered in the workplace. Sometimes it can extend beyond the workplace.
Sure.
So we see, other people now, being bullied also in social media, but being bullied by people that essentially work with them. So it can take,
Sure.
those various forms. So it's
Yeah.
both direct and sometimes it's indirect.
So speaking of, I know with the overt signs of bullying, they're out there. You know, if
Yeah.
someone is overtly humiliating you, everyone can agree. But with the covert ones, the ones that are a little bit hidden, are they not subjective? What happens then if, say, I'm very sensitive, right? And you speak to me in a tone that I don't appreciate. But when you're speaking to me, your tone is okay. Because with the covert ones, I would assume that there's a little bit of subjectivity that comes into
Yes.
play with that. So where is the line of bullying and just being sensitive in the workplace?
All right. I think the key thing is consistency. You know, if the behavior is repeated, then we can assume that it's not something that happened by mistake. So
Sure.
it's obviously goal-directed behavior, you know, so there has to be that consistency. If someone is consistently, you know, performing things that makes you to feel humiliated, we can assume that that's bullying.
And what about, say, being expected to do things outside of work hours and your
Definitely.
livelihood being
Definitely,
threatened? Is that also bullying? Or is it just you being seen as an overperformer?
It depends where the expectation is coming from. You know, if the expectation is coming from your employer, for example, and if it's consistent, I think the key thing is consistency. So if it's a once-off, you know, sometimes we can understand that maybe there are things that are, you know, that are uncontrollable that's happening there, you know. So maybe employers would be, or employees rather, would be asked to work outside of working hours. So I think it's the consistency part. If it's constant behavior, it's more targeted towards a particular person or group.
Sure. And we're joined by Wellness Ace, as you guys know. We're joined by Wellness Ace every episode. What do you think about workplace bullying?
Well, I think the very same way, and it's actually something that is actually affecting like a lot of people. Looking at how it actually happens, as she just mentioned, like the consistency, but then I think like it's always like important to understand the effects it has on like the mental health. Like, I mean, now from my own understanding, simple things such as like gossiping, you understand, because like you probably gossiping about something that you don't know about, you understand, you heard it from Kete, Dim Kete says, who says like something about another person, then you take it and then you gossip. I feel like that's also like another form of bullying, because like you're actually transferring information that you don't even have facts about, and then what does it do to the other person emotionally? What does it do to them having to work in such an environment? So like it just like has like a lot of I think it's just like understood, and it can also like be subjective from one person to another on how they actually could be also be feeling bullied. For instance, you guys just mentioned like a very important point now to say you having to work outside your working hours, and then if your employer expects you to work like outside your working hours, you were hired to work from 8 to 4 as per your job description. But they expected to, who's paying you? Are you getting paid for those hours? You understand? Because then there's people who often get to work, suppose from 8 o'clock, and then when they get home, they still have to add another 2 to 3 hours, having to continue what was this thing. Because like, I think people just need to understand their job description. If you're hired from 8 to 4 o'clock, you pack and go, because then like you're not getting paid for those hours if ever you are expected to work. So I think that also like is a very common thing that is actually a form of bullying, from having it to be from employer to employee. So there's just like a lot. Like, as I mentioned, gossiping is also one of them.
Seems like gossiping really close to your heart.
No, gossiping is actually like one of them. I feel like it's like one of those.
And it's really damaging, I think, to one's mental health, but we'll delve into mental health in a little bit. One last question that I want to ask Molebeheng in terms of what it looks like. What about excluding someone, say during break time? Say we just don't want to sit with you. You can't sit at our table because, you know, that happens a lot in a lot of workplaces where if everyone is being professional, but you're not welcomed in certain settings.
Yeah.
But consistently so. Like what you said, that the key word is consistency. Is that bullying?
Yes.
Being excluded from.
Yes.
So now I must sit with you, even if I don't want to sit with you, just so you're not bullied.
But it depends, like I said, on the consistency.
Yeah.
And also, if we think about it, when we go to work, we are not there to make friends,
Sure.
right? So, it's difficult to then gather why, even with the knowledge that we are not there to make friends, you would seek to exclude someone. Because we are essentially, when we are there, we are all co-workers.
Yeah.
So what would be a reason then that, someone decides that, I don't want to sit with you, Yeah, but I do agree also with what our wellness ace said as well with regards to gossip, Gossip definitely, and it definitely is a form of, bullying. I think we should look at it also in this way. What is the intention? Nobody, hardly gossips for good intentions. Usually when someone gossips, it's to try and, assassinate someone's character, so it is a form of bullying in a way.
So when I read on the definition of gossip, right, it is sharing someone's information without their consent.
Yes.
What if you tell me something, a joke, maybe that your husband shared with you, and I shared it with someone else, and obviously it gets distorted and. My intention was not to harm you, but that still is gossip, sharing someone's information without their consent, any kind of information, personal information, right? So where do we draw the line? Do we just not spread? Like, say you tell me a joke. Let me tell me a joke about your household. I share it. I'm like, yo, wellness aids, you would not believe what Mlebing said, her husband, but you were just sharing it with me. Where do we then draw the line of bullying with sharing of information in the office?
I think the key thing is don't share what about others, what those people haven't shared to others. If someone is sharing a joke specifically to you, there's a reason why they're not sharing it with someone else, So we should always have that boundary in place that let's keep things confidential, If Kaukelo is sharing something with me, it does not necessarily give me the right to share it with someone else,
100%.
And if we think about it, what is the intention behind me now relaying the information to someone else? A lot of the times with gossip, the intention is not always good, Yes, we may say it's just merely sharing information, but why? What's that burning edge that makes someone to want to share that information? So a lot of the times the intention is not really good. A lot of the time it's informed by someone wanting to assassinate someone's character.
Sure. And while we're talking about the assassination of someone's character, I would assume that workplace bullying in all the forms that we've mentioned right now, because it seems like it's not just humiliation and intimidation, but it's the gossiping and it's the exclusion of people, right? What are some of the effects? Because obviously it will affect your mental health if you being the one bullied. What are some of the effects that we can expect from workplace bullying in terms of mental health?
Okay, like you said, definitely your mental health, it is quite distressing, for someone to wake up and go to a work environment that is like that. More than anything, it can also be traumatic, very traumatic, So later on, it can lead to someone developing, mental health conditions like anxiety, like your depression, but also your self-esteem gets to be affected.
Sure.
But beyond just, your mental health being affected, it can also lead to a low work morale, The working environment does not become conducive anymore for someone that works there.
And obviously that would lead to like low productivity.
Definitely.
And also,
definitely.
What is this? Employee turnover. Like
yes,
people leave the company and
definitely.
So it's actually employers, workplace bullying costs you money.
No, it does.
It does.
It does. Actually, stats also say that about 3.5% of a country's GDP, it's usually affected by stress and bullying.
Sure.
So, we do know that the country's GDP, basically, it's a way in which, a country's economic health, is highlighted and so forth. So definitely with bullying, there's low productivity. essentially just has the snowball effect that
Yeah.
there is no longer any turnover, and ultimately the economy also suffers,
So because it actually affects the companies and obviously the employers, what is then their role in terms of either alleviating workplace bullying or educating people on what it is and obviously ultimately making it go away?
So they actually have a legal obligation.
Ooh.
According to the Employee Equity Act, they have a legal obligation to ensure that they become very proactive about eliminating any form of workplace bullying, like you said. So obviously, that means, being proactive, such as having policies in place regarding how to address workplace bullying, what it is actually, and how to address it, or what steps to take, once someone finds themselves in a situation where they are being bullied. But more than anything as well, I think it's their responsibility to ensure that they open channels of where people can go for support,
Sure, yeah.
and also have more of a standardized protocol or procedure, with regards to how is workplace bullying, dealt with. Is there a standardized, observation or investigation rather, in processes like that.
And
So-
obviously there should be consequences and they should stick to them.
Yeah, part of policies, yes, would be
Yeah.
them highlighting the consequences.
And what can then the employees say that are part of or that are being bullied? What practical steps can they take on, right? So I'm asking this because there's people that are very outspoken. They'll tell you outright, listen, I don't like your tone, I don't appreciate it, let's be professional. But you get people with different personalities that aren't as open, that don't want to cause more issues, that avoid confrontation. So given that entire picture, right, how can employees then take practical steps to either not be bullied or if they are bullied to take steps to stopping the bullying?
Yeah, I do quite agree with what you're saying that, some people are more proactive, some are more passive with regards to taking those steps, as you mentioned. But, the one thing is that people should know that they need to speak out. They need to, ultimately. I know that it's quite intimidating. Some
Yeah.
don't speak out because obviously they're scared that they may further be more victimized. They feel as though they may end up losing their job and all of that. But it starts with speaking out. If you don't speak out, you are enabling the behavior to continue. So that's the first step. And, people should know that there is always someone that is willing to listen. If it's your supervisor, for example, that is bullying you, they have a line manager. So you can take it further and report to the next line manager, Or also, with various, organizations, they have an employee assistance program or employee wellness programs. And a lot of the times, it employs people that are outsourced. So it's not really people that are, employed per se by that organization. So you can be assured that, if I do disclose, the challenges I'm going through, it's going to be kept anonymous, it's going to be kept confidential, it's going to be impartial, the person is going to be impartial more than anything. So it first starts by people talking, you first need to take a step to say, I'm going to talk about it. If you don't talk about it, the behavior will continue. You talk about it, if possible, you access services of your employee assistance program. If you're not comfortable with that, you can also always access, services outside.
Sure.
Like your counselors, your psychologists, your life coaches, and the rest.
I actually want to ask about, because you're talking about outsourcing, right?
Yeah.
I want to talk about the South African context, right? Because we have a history, obviously, of apartheid, we have a history of, BEE, being in place, employing, a diverse group of people. So what I want to know is workplace bullying different in South Africa? And I also want to know about the small SMEs, because I know with small SMEs usually they employ their family members, their friends, people that are close to them, and that's where workplace bullying is most prevalent.
I agree.
Because then if you're going to report my dad to me, come now, what do you expect me to do? You're going to get fired or you're going to get into trouble.
I agree.
So let's talk about the South African context. What can we do then with all those factors? Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. I think we still have a long way to go. Right? I think we still have a long way to go as a country, but it starts by us raising awareness first and foremost on what workplace bullying is. You'd be surprised that I think there was a survey, I can't remember, I think it's 2012 that was released that, basically says that about 50.1 years of people are not even aware where to report.
Sure.
They're not aware of all of that, where to actually go and report. So that shows you that we still have a long way to go in really raising awareness on issues like this. So it first starts there. It first starts by us, shining the spotlight, through platforms like this, this is a thing, this is actually, a problem, and this is how you get to deal with it. That's the first thing. Once people are aware of, this being a problem, then now they are able to be more proactive in getting help, Yeah.
And reminding people that, guys, you have power. You have power
Definitely.
to speak up for yourself. You have power to change your environment, because we spend so much time at work. We spend between 8 and 12 hours at work. I cannot imagine staying in a place that causes anxiety, that causes depression and burnout, and like what you said, I didn't even know it could cause like acute traumatic or post-traumatic stress disorders. So are there any cultural factors or even personality factors that make people more easy to target in terms of workplace bullying?
Yeah, definitely. We did talk about, someone being a bit more passive.
Yeah.
So if someone is a bit more passive, it is quite possible that they may seem as though they are an easier target or they are a bit more vulnerable, because the person knows that this one, no matter what I do, they're not going to do something about it. If someone lacks boundaries, so if you become a people pleaser, for example, it's easy for someone to prey on you and be able to pick on you, But also, if we talk about it from a cultural perspective, if we look at corporate cultures, for example, a lot of hostility and, humiliation, a lot of the times it's associated with being, in a managerial position. Yeah. It's rewarded. That type of behavior is rewarded. So it becomes a culture then that enables the bullying to continue. But there are also certain social biases that people have. It can be biases based on a person's gender, for example. So imagine, you're a female and then you're working in a male-dominated environment. You can imagine how you will be halted from progressing the ladder and so forth, So there are cultures that are there, and some of them are based on those social biases that we have. Sometimes it's people are bullied because of their race, for example, Let's say someone, comes from the Northwest, they come to KZN, for example, and it's a Zulu-dominated, area, and then you come speaking your Setswana. It's possible that those people may not necessarily be welcoming. Yeah. So because of social biases that we have, or certain stereotypes that we have attached to race. Yeah.
Also, you actually say something very important that sparked up a question in my head, right? If you are not being allowed to progress, right? And you are deserving, or if you're not being rewarded, or rewarded either with a promotion or rewarded with a bonus, and your KPIs are aligning, is that bullying?
Yes.
Definitely that's bullying.
How well does A say?
I think it is.
Definitely that's bullying.
Because it happens a lot. It happens a lot.
Definitely it is bullying. It's hampering someone from, progressing the ladder or getting what they deserve. If you are putting in the effort, if you're putting in the work, you should be remunerated. And remuneration, I'm not just saying in terms of monetary gain. It can be you getting recognition, for that type of job that you're doing. So it is a form of bullying. I think it's also important for us to actually also understand what goes behind the mind of the bully. A lot of the times people would assume that a bully is someone that is quite confident in themselves and in their nature, but actually it's someone that is that feels very insecure. It's someone that feels as though once I start orchestrating a whole scenario where someone else can look inferior, it means that now I have an opportunity to be recognized. You know?
It sounds like children's. It sounds like, like school bullying. It sounds like they have the same characteristics.
Yes, bullying ultimately, it has the same sort of, or the same sort of setup or makeup. Yeah, definitely. So a bully is someone that is not secure within themselves, and they are not secure with their abilities or their skills to be able to be recognized. So in order for them to feel more superior, they try and orchestrate a whole scene or scenario where someone else, maybe co-workers or some subordinates or whatever the case may be, are seen as the ones that are more inferior.
I'm going to ask a question now. And guys, these are not my personal beliefs. I just think it's a question that some people might have. So please don't attack me. But it sounds like the bully themselves have mental issues.
Definitely.
Right? Low self-esteem. Maybe they could have, been abused at home, and that's why they seek power. Because what you said, they seek superiority, right? Do we then help the bully?
I think they need help. They need help. Bullies themselves do need help.
Do we have sympathy for them? Empathy for them?
In my line of work, everyone needs help.
Everyone,
you cannot discriminate on a person based on how they are functioning. But definitely, I do agree that they have been hurt at some point in their lives. There's what we call childhood adversities. So what that means is that if someone is exposed to childhood trauma of some sort, whether it's abuse, whether it's neglect, whether it's witnessing domestic violence in the home, it can end up, shaping their perception of themselves and how they also interact with the world. So, some can end up feeling inferior, and that grows on them if they don't end up getting professional help.
A lot of them, I would assume, don't think they have a problem.
Yeah.
Right? So then how do we highlight in a workplace environment, right? Say there's policies in place, say there's nepotism in the workspace. How then do we highlight to the bully because they are hurting, essentially they're hurting someone or a group of people, and essentially hurting the company as a whole, because like you said, low productivity, and less money for the company. How do we then highlight or get help for the bully without them being open to it? Because I would imagine if you told me I'm a bully, I'd be like, no. This is just, and a lot of them have this is just how I am attitude. How do we then highlight to them, ma'am, sir, you kind of might need help?
I think it goes back to the awareness part. Once awareness is raised on issues around bullying, and also maybe extending further to look into what a bully, is going through, what's going through in their mind and all of that, it can start opening, the doorway for someone to start the process of getting help. We need to normalize getting help for our mental health. But more than anything, again, employers, once they see that there are people that or employees that bully others, they have a responsibility. Hence, I said even the Employment Equity Act highlights that they have a responsibility to ensure that the person who's the bully gets professional help. So it can be anything such as saying, we are referring you through an employee assistance program where you're going to get counseling and, all of that. So the environment should not always be punitive. It shouldn't be punitive. It should essentially be an area that is conducive, conducive for productivity, for creativity, but even for your mental health to be able to thrive.
And then on a plot twist, is having a strict supervisor a form of bullying?
What is strict? Because
Exactly.
you get people that are really authoritative.
I mean,
there's different leadership styles. So what is strict?
Well, a strict, it's me having to be a supervisor that I want work to be done. I want production, so I want work to be done. For example, we have to produce 20 bottles of water, for instance, in a day, and it's what we are supposed to do. You understand? And then probably you are not working because you probably spend more time on your phone and stuff. And then me
Wow.
being strict, I want to tell you and emphasize that, like, you know what, we need to produce 20 liters of this thing, and then it's not getting done. Like, remember, they're also getting pressure from the management. So I just want to understand, is it a form of bullying,
Before-
having to get work done?
Before Molebehing answers, I think if we have a target, the target must be reached.
Yeah.
And if you have a team, there should be a team dynamic, there should be alignment within the team. So people need to be able to realize that maybe this person does not have capacity today. So let's help them. Let's delegate. There should be some kind of teamwork, and the manager or the team leader should be able to know what's happening with all the people that are under him, so he can delegate the right tasks to the right people, so the target can be made. So I think someone expecting you to do your job and you're on your phone and they discipline you. Personally, Mlebeheng will answer, personally, why are you on your phone? How I do your job, guys? No, that one, you must do your job. Discipline is not
Don't bullying,
Yeah. I agree. I agree. And just to add on to that, remember earlier on when we were defining bullying, we said that it's any behavior that serves to humiliate and intimidate. So, if a boss is saying, or a line manager is saying you need to do your job that you are hired for, a job that forms part and parcel of your job description, it's not a behavior that is said to humiliate or intimidate you, but it's just a measure that is put in place to ensure that there's productivity. So definitely I agree. I wouldn't necessarily define that as workplace bullying.
I think maybe it could be workplace bullying, like what Molebeheng said. If maybe it's targeted at one person consistently, maybe you being blamed consistently.
If it's humiliating.
If it's humiliating. But if you're being told don't. And
But
also
it's-
the
it's-
policy says don't be on your phone and you're on your phone.
But if it's consequences of poor work performance, I think it's not bullying.
I think we're all in
Yes.
agreement.
Yes.
But what if I've disclosed that, say, I'm struggling and I'm still expected, without any assistance from my employer, to still meet the target? But I've expressed to, say, my line manager that, listen, this week I'm having a depressive episode. I have a letter from maybe my psychologist saying, listen, I'm just not well. And they're like, I hear you. I sympathize. I empathize. Mental health. Do your job.
Yeah, we shouldn't.
Is that bullying?
I think first and foremost, we shouldn't underestimate the impact that one's mental health has on their functioning.
Yes.
In this case, particularly their work functioning. So, workspaces should be understanding and supportive to that. But again, one can't just come and say, I'm dealing with something, whereas they're not even getting help for it. So there should be an action plan. If you're saying that I'm struggling, I'm going through this, what action plan do you have in place to ensure that you get help for what you're going through?
Who's responsible for the action plan?
Both employer and the employee.
Okay.
We are responsible for our healing, but also the employer is also responsible for ensuring that those channels for support are open. Hence, there's the employee assistance programs and employee wellness programs in the workspaces.
A lot of companies don't have those. Hey, Malene?
Yeah,
A lot of
we still have a long way
companies
to
do
go.
not
We
have
still
those.
have a long way to go in South Africa.
But they're supposed to be there. I mean, like
Yes.
having to have like the EAP and this thing. And sometimes, like you get people that actually they are there, but they're not aware that they actually exist. Because I think it should form part of the
Orientation.
orientation,
Yeah.
yes, or induction from the HR to actually educate people. Because then in most cases you find a person, yes, I'm being bullied and stuff. They come to psychologists, they come to consult with medical experts to talk about these things. And you ask and say, did you explore this EAP or wellness? They're like, what is that? They don't know. Like a lot of employees don't know about it. They don't know that it exists. I don't know for whatever reason, but from what I've heard like a lot of cases where a lot of employees don't know about the EAPs or employee assistance programs.
I actually want to ask them, say they are made aware, they get the help that they need. Are they then forced to go back into the same department with the person that is bullying them but hasn't received help? Say I've received help, and then my boss is like, as you seem better, you can come back to work or whatever. But now that person hasn't really received the help. Is it my right to say be asked to move to a different branch or different department, where I'm like, this is not a healthy environment for me. It's really, I received help, yes, but seeing this person, encountering this person, say I have trauma from it, so seeing this person is very triggering for me. Is it then my right to ask to be moved away from the situation within the company?
Yes, definitely, it does remain an employee's right. But more than anything, it should be supported by a report from your team that managed you. Say, for example, your psychologist that managed you, your occupational therapist that managed you, or the psychiatrist, or the multidisciplinary team as a whole that managed you. So usually it holds more weight if there's a report behind it. So the first step would be to get that help, and then from there on, the team would finish one with a report with recommendations that
100%.
this person should either be shifted or, whatever the recommendation states at the time. But it is the right of the employee.
I would imagine it is. Wellness Ace, do you have any more questions before I ask my final 2 questions from Leboheng?
Well, I think my question was just mainly based on what is bullying not, you understand, so that we get to understand both sides. Because then there's also a misconception between the two, as we just have stipulated that having a strict supervisor, getting to get counseling from the employer, getting demoted, for example, for poor work performance and stuff. I personally feel that's not bullying, but then maybe if ever we can maybe clarify more points around that. But then I feel it's also important just to highlight what is it not, so that people don't think each and everything maybe an action maybe that is done by the employer to take action against maybe, for example, your another poor work performance. It's not always bullying, you understand. So I think there's also that line between the two. You need to just understand the two. Yeah.
So Mlebe, what is not bullying that a lot of people think might
be bullying? Yeah, I think that's a very...
I think it takes us back to, your job description and your job responsibility. So first and foremost, ask yourself, whatever that my supervisor seeks from me, is it part and parcel of my job description, right? Is it something that I'm employed for? Number 2, does it mean that I have to extend myself outside of working hours? If, since I've also said, we also need to look at the fact of consistency. If it happens once, maybe there's an emergency of some sort and you are expected to work outside of working hours, you should be remunerated. In that case, we wouldn't necessarily say it is workplace bullying. However, if the behavior is consistently, you are expected to work outside of your working hours, you are expected to work or perform duties that are not necessarily part and parcel of your job description. So say, for example, someone sends you on an errand to go and buy them lunch.
Hi, Bo.
If it happens, it happens quite a lot.
Yeah, I'd be so offended.
It happens quite a lot, So if it's not part and parcel of your job description, and also we should also look at, does the behavior seek to humiliate the person or intimidate them? If it's someone asking you, do your job, I want good performance from you, that's not necessarily bullying, It also depends on the approach of the manager. If the manager, for example, comes out in front of co-workers, that's insulting you, because they want good productivity from you, that is bullying. Because they shouldn't be insults, the behavior or their effort shouldn't necessarily lead to one feeling humiliated.
Yeah.
Sure. That's very important actually. Understand, and guys, read your job descriptions. Read your job descriptions, read your contracts, know what is expected of you. And if you're being asked nicely, but don't just do your job. But I think again, if it's consistent, humiliating, intimidating, then it might really fall under the workplace bullying, right? So Mlebing, are there any resources that people can that they can access outside of, say, their workplace? Say their workplace is not a place where it has the employee wellness facilities. Are there any resources that people can use to help themselves, particularly the victims of workplace bullying?
Yeah, there's definitely help that's always available. One can access services of mental health care providers through government, so the public sector. If they don't prefer that, they can go through the private sector. So there is always help available. Your government hospitals, for example, they do have a team of psychologists, occupational therapists, psychiatrists, social workers and all of that. But if they prefer to go private, then the route is also always open. Yeah. But the key thing is to get help.
The key thing is to get help. And I'm going to ask you a final question, and that is, what are the nuggets that you want to leave with our viewers?
Yeah, basically your work should stimulate creativity. It should stimulate, growth. It shouldn't be a place that is toxic. If it's anything like that, then know that there's always help that is available. There's always someone that is willing to listen. So go and get help. It's okay to ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. It's actually a sign of being resourceful.
I think being vulnerable enough to know that you need help and accessing the help and pushing yourself to access the help, that is strength.
According to stats, maybe in your own experience, like where does it often happen more, this bullying, when we're looking at gender? Is it on male, male on females, or maybe females on males? And the question that I want to also ask and emphasize on is that, like, do we also get workplace bullying where females bully men in the workplace? And do they actually speak up in your experience?
I think it depends from organization to organization. If you come to an organization where it's mostly male dominated and it's not really open to the female gender, it's going to be very prevalent that you are going to experiencing the bullying towards the male people that are there. But also we've seen a trend where female superiors usually halter the female co-workers from climbing up the ladder for some reason. But yeah, definitely, we always rely on data. We always rely on statistical data. But quite frankly, data in South Africa is quite sparse. This is an area that still needs to be researched quite a lot. So there's not a lot of statistics with regards to, the gender and all of that. But from what we are seeing as a trend from people coming into our office, that's the trend that I often see.
Okay. Right. Okay.
So we actually had an opportunity to interview Aslam, who's a legal expert, to tell us about the legal side of workplace bullying. Here's the clip. Take a look.
Workplace bullying, harassment, unfortunately, is becoming more and more common these days. And my honest view, people are scared. They are scared to speak up because they're worried that they're going to be victimized even further and lose their jobs. So the purpose of today's video is not only to talk about the law, because the law is meaningless if a person can't take actions on the law. It's one thing to have the law in a textbook, and another thing is the law in practicality. So let's start off with the textbook first. The textbook says, if you are being bullied and harassed at work, you have a right to file a grievance, you have a right to take it up to the CCMA, and you have a right to seek some kind of compensation for the way that you've been treated. This can be either at the CCMA or the labor court. That's what the textbook says. The practicality is the one who is being bullied will keep quiet about it. They are usually already scared. They're already anxious. They already are being humiliated at work. They don't want to speak up even more. They don't want to make themselves the target even more. Let's start off with understanding what causes bullying in the workplace. Usually, it is the culture and what is perceived as the norm or what is accepted by management in that situation. It's a top-down approach. Bullying doesn't start from the ground up, meaning you don't find relatively junior workers starting to bully everyone else. It's usually the culture of management, leadership, managers, anyone with some power that either takes part in it or overlooks it when other people do it.
Sure.
So as a result, bullying becomes the norm, bullying becomes the accepted situation. Now, what type of bullying happens at work? It's not always physical assault or verbal assault. Sometimes bullying can involve making threats about or unreasonable threats about job security, telling someone, we can replace you tomorrow, your job is meaningless here, do you know who I am? I run this place. All those type of comments. Also, bullying can also be taking your work, giving it to a colleague, and giving them unreasonable deadlines, micromanaging them, singling them out in meetings. That's very common. Making snide comments and then just say, I'm joking. I also see that. And then when you report it, the person says, but I was just joking. So those are so we discussed the causes of bullying. We discussed how bullying symptoms come up and the signs of bullying. What is the effect it has on the employee? Number one, a poorer performance. So performance is not increased, it's actually decreased. The person is not motivated to perform. Number two, increased absenteeism. You find the person staying away from work more often than not, because who wants to go there? Why would you want to naturally go to a hostile, intimidating environment? And the third is basically a low self-esteem, low self-worth, personal problems, health problems, etc. So you will find, if you are watching this video today, I'm going to just explain everything in a nutshell again. So you will have like a very short video you can post. If you're missing work repeatedly because you just have no desire to go back to that toxic environment, if you find yourself taking sick leave all the time, if you find yourself previously used to love your job, now you just don't want to perform anymore, look at what is the cause behind that. Sometimes the cause is in yourself. Maybe you're not motivated anymore. But sometimes the cause is the toxic environment and the micromanagement and the bullying and the harassment and the snide comments and the performance evaluations. That's a big one. I'm going to score you. For instance, you might have been scoring very well over the last couple of years, but now I'm going to decide to give you a lower score. You don't get your bonus. You're not sucking up to me anymore. All of that has an impact on an employee. So far we've covered a lot. What is bullying? How it takes the form, how it affects an employee. Let's now move on to what you can practically do if you are faced in the situation.
Asma, before we get to that, I actually have a question, all right, regarding workplace cultures, because every workplace has a culture of sorts, right? Like the way they run things, the way they integrate, the way they, like their interpersonal relationships, right? So now my question becomes, what happens when the perpetrators are protected by the culture of the company? Like what you said, maybe the snide comments are something that's very normalized, or maybe the harassment is normalized. What happens then to the perpetrators? What happens when I come in as a new person that's not familiar with the culture, the toxic culture of that particular company? Because a lot of, especially small owned companies, have very toxic workplace cultures, right? So how do we then, one, identify the perpetrators and also call out the perpetrators that are protected by the company culture and the employer?
It's a good question. That's like saying, how do I deal with the bully at school when all the people in the class are friends with the bully?
100%.
It's the same way that you deal with it at school, that you deal with it at work. You got to confront the person. There's no other way. And that's the hard part. So what happens is people invariably just resign. And that's so sad because the law provides for something called a constructive dismissal. A constructive dismissal is basically where an employee is forced to resign from work because of how they've been treated. You can get compensation at the CCMA. So why give that person the joy of resigning, right? And then they don't even have to face the consequences. The best thing that I can tell you, if you are being bullied at work, number one, get evidence of it. Video the person. Get audio recordings of it. Take screenshots. Take emails. You know, get evidence. Evidence wins cases. Evidence wins cases. Evidence wins cases. I say that 3 times because when you go to the CCMA, no one's going to care how nice you are, what a good person you are. They want to see the evidence. And no one from the CCMA is going to fight your case. Today, I had a client who said to me, what you mean? I thought the CCMA is there to fight for employees. That's a harsh truth. They are there to be an umpire between the employer and the employee. So no one's going to sit in the CCMA and give you your case and say, no, don't worry, sorry about it, come take some money. The company is going to come represent it. You don't have evidence. What's going to happen? Do you see? Evidence wins cases. Evidence wins cases. So get evidence is step 1. Step 2, after you got your evidence, confront the person. The reason why I say do it in that way is because if you confront them before the evidence, they might change their behavior and do it in a more sneaky way. So get the evidence first, confront them. Number 2, you don't have to tell them. You can record someone if you're a participant in the conversation, according to the RICA Act. So if you are there and they're talking to you this way, or get your colleagues to write statements about it. They probably won't because they're all worried about their own jobs. But the reality is get evidence, talk to the person, say to them, listen, I'm unhappy about what's going on, X, Y, and Z. I feel like I'm being treated unfairly. And can you please stop doing that to me? If they still do the behavior, you then can file a formal grievance. A grievance is basically issue, background, resolution. Issue, I'm being bullied at work. Background, all the evidence. Resolution, please ask so-and-so to stop bullying me. After that, if they still don't fix the situation, if the company doesn't fix it, so now you've got the evidence, you've spoken to the person informally, you've taken the formal route to a grievance. If it's still not resolved, you can sue them at the CCMA, the company that is, for compensation up to 12 months of your salary, but you would have to resign from work. So you do have these mechanisms in play, and I think people are just too scared, so they just leave, but you're leaving anyway. So you might as well sue them at the CCMA.
Yeah. And what I wanted to actually ask is, I know preventing the behavior from taking place, like team buildings and, maybe workshops on interpersonal relationships and companies would be a great way of preventing the behavior. But what is the role of the employer once the behavior has already started in, like, it's part of the culture? What is the role of the employer in one, decreasing this behavior and also disciplining the people that are bullies in the company?
I like that you talk with your hands. A lot of people say I talk with my hands and it distracts people. But that's just, yeah, I just use my hand. That's how I talk. I mean, that's just the way to express yourself. So actually, in today's video, I'm much more subdued with my hands. But to answer your question, management needs to lead from the front. That means if you find this type of behavior happening in your organization, you need to put a stop to it. If you have the power to do that, and I'm not saying go on a huge march and create a big scene out of it in the boardroom. I'm just saying call the two people in or call the perpetrator in informally and say, this is not going to fly. Can you stop doing this? If they still do it, take action against them. I think that will build goodwill and trust amongst their employees.
Sure. So take action against the company and not the person.
No, you are asked what can the manager do if you're in position of power? What can you do? You own the company or you're in management. You would take action against the person who's causing this.
Sure. And what are the workplace policies governing? I know there's workplace policies governing like harassment and very drastic, I'm going to say quote unquote drastic behaviors. But what about, say, verbal bullying? You know, when you just don't appreciate the way someone has spoken to you. What are some of the workplace policies that a lot of people aren't aware of?
There's no workplace policies per se. So essentially, there's the law. The law stipulates that you're not allowed to be harassed, you're not allowed to be abused at work. And that is in terms of the Code of Good Practice and also the Labor Relations Act. Also, there's discrimination is not allowed. So people can't be discriminated on the basis of their race, on the basis of their gender, their disabilities, all of that. Then that would be the Employment Equity Act. Everyone needs to be treated the same.
And also, what I want to know is, because you said it's more of a legal matter than it is like a workplace policy matter. How can workplaces actually implement the law and bullying and harassment into the workplace policies? Say if they need to orientate someone or anything of that sort, because a lot of these behaviors are subjective. You know what I mean? I could just not appreciate your tone or maybe your demeanor when you're talking to me, and I might see that as bullying. How can then workplaces implement a very fair policy to stipulate exactly what bullying is?
I think you would just speak to any HR consultant or a labor law firm and they'd be able to assist you and draw up a policy. You would need a policy on what the definition of bullying is considered to be and the examples of bullying and what action will be taken against the perpetrators. And then you just do training on the new policy. So you will induct employees and everyone and say, look, guys, we just launched a new policy on workplace bullying. This is what it means. These are the consequences. Please note, pay attention. Don't do this.
Okay. And I have one last question before we get into like the more casual questions, because I know you need to go. How can employers create a more supportive environment, particularly for people that are mental health care users, for people that are new to the environment, and so on?
Well, I think if you're an employer watching this, or someone in management, authority, and power, talk to people, talk to everyone in the organization. Make sure you greet them, make sure you make them feel acknowledged, understand their contributions. If you have to criticize them, get their input first. Make sure it's fair criticism based on evidence. I think if you do all of that, you'll lead from the front and people will respect your authority. You must be a manager not by designation, but by your behavior.
Sure, I love that. So do first and expect then others to follow.
Yes, servant leadership.
Sure. Okay. So the casual questions are as follows. Is bullying a criminal offense?
No.
Can you go to jail for
No.
bullying?
I'm a labor lawyer.
Is it not?
It's not. Yeah, you
Sure.
can't go to jail for bullying. You can go to jail for you can get like a protection order and a harassment order. That's different, right? I'm talking about workplace bullying at work.
Yeah.
So yes, in a strict way, let's say someone harasses you, you can take a protection order out against them or a harassment order, and they violate that again, then you can have them arrested and you go to jail for that. But I'm talking about strictly from the perspective of labor law. So, for example, if you breach a workplace rule, you will get dismissed. You're not going to go to jail for it.
Okay. And what powers do employees that are working in toxic work environments have over poor management, anti-bullying policies, and their implementation? Say your boss actually says to you, take me to the CCMA. I don't care. Nothing's going to change here. What powers do those people have? Do they actually take them to the CCMAs? Is that where it aims?
Yes, you can take them to the CCMA. There's up to 12 months compensation that can be given against the company. And when the company has to pay up, they'll have to listen.
Okay, and then what happens if your life is then now in danger? If you're being threatened, like the life of your kids, your own life, what then happens when, say, the bully is someone in extreme power?
Very actually realistic. I had someone yesterday whose life was threatened and talk of muti and all those kind of things. So you need to get the evidence. It comes back to what I told you in the same recipe I gave you in the beginning. Get the evidence first, because without the evidence, it's just your word versus their word. Number 2, talk to them informally. Number 3, file a grievance. Number 4, take it to the CCMA. If you follow those steps, you'll cover yourself.
And
I just make it simple, but that is,
yeah.
I try and make it in a way that anyone watching the video will be able to understand it. I don't use any legal jargon or complicated terms. How can I make it as simple as possible so the person watching it can empower themselves?
I was going to say that I know that the mission of legal educate and empower, right? So what closing words of wisdom would you give to someone that is in this position but genuinely afraid to take action, like you said in the beginning, because they might be unemployed, it might affect the livelihood? What final words of encouragement, except I know you already said take evidence, take action, but what would you say to them in order to get them to take the evidence and action?
I'm going to hold my phone and bring it closer just to emphasize the point. You only get one life. As far as we know, you don't come back. Your lifespan is short. If you are working in a toxic environment that is impacting your health, causing you to perform badly, impacting you personally in your life, you have rights, but your rights are meaningless, meaning they don't mean anything, no value, if you are not going to stand up for them. It's like having the ability to read a book, but you don't read. You are no different from the person who can't read. So having your rights mean you must be able to stand up for yourself. Standing up for yourself means get the evidence, talk to the person informally, file a grievance, and if that fails, go CCMA. You like the videos that we've spoken about today, you like the information that we've given you today, head over to Legal Leaders anywhere, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. Just type in Legal Leaders. We've got, I would say, almost 1,000 videos. On TikTok alone, more than 1,000 videos, all available online to employees to empower you. What excuse do you have? Stand up for yourself. Know your rights.
Thank you so much, Aslam. This was absolutely enlightening. I hope you have an amazing day. I know we will, now that we've gotten a hold of you. You're a very hard man to get a hold of. So very, very grateful that we got a hold of you. And thank you so much for the insights.
So Molebeheng, where can people find you on the socials?
Right,
Or
so-
in general?
All right, so I have a private practice. It's in Brits. If people want to book a session, they can call through our reception line. It's 012-252 1111. And then, yeah, and then with regards to the social media platforms, we are available on Facebook, on Instagram, as well as TikTok. You can just type Molebogeng Moholo Clinical Psychologist. And then on Instagram as well, you can look for Bua_Let's Talk.
I really think I've seen Bua_Let's Talk, guys. So you've heard ways you can find Molebeheng, but guys, please, please, please seek help. It doesn't make you weak. If anything, it's a great, great, great way of showing your strength. So from myself, Molebeheng, and our wellness ace, it's goodbye.